Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're going to take a look at the little-known model called the Les Paul DC Pro. This was the first model from the Gibson custom shop to utilize the double-cut standard body shape. Now, you can talk about things like the Gibson Spirit that was done back in the early 80s, but this was like the first time that Gibson got serious about this design. Now, I've actually documented the DC prototype that was done in the early 90s. You can check out this video for that. But this is the one that came before that standard production run. And you're going to notice, this headstock is really funky looking. But you're also going to notice something else. I've always said that the double cut standards, they were used to compete against PRS. They were designed to do that. And I get a lot of people saying, hey, what about Hamer? That's more what the Spirit and Latoska were after. Hamer wasn't anything new at this point in time. PRS was, and it was an emerging market, so Gibson needed something similar. And check out this headstock. It's almost just the PRS headstock. I mean, it's obviously different. It has a very Gibson flair to it with the open book at the top of the headstock instead of the whoopity-woo that PRSs have. But you can't say that they're not similar. But in the unboxing video for this one, people were guessing that this was a heritage guitar. So I thought, why don't we go ahead and compare these three together here? Once you see them side by side, the heritage headstock really isn't even that close. It doesn't have the curvy edges and it doesn't have the straight string pull design. In a blind opinion test, I would probably select the middle one for being the most attractive. So this custom shop version, it was introduced in 1997, so 1 year before the standards. And I think it was produced for a few years until like the early 2000s. The most common one you'll see has the bridge and stop bar tailpiece with humbuckers, but there's also a mysterious P90 version with a wrap tailpiece out there. I would love to get my hands on one of those in the future for documentation purposes. But you can find some really cool fruity flavors, but most of them have really nice figured tops. And this one, it does have a nice top. It's just kind of hard to see because it's a trans black finish. So let's go ahead and compare this one to a DC standard as well as the prototype. The main difference is obviously the headstock. Straight string pull versus the traditional one. You still have the Gibson mother of pearl logos, but due to the smaller headstock size, there's no Les Paul silkscreen. It is moved to the truss rod cover instead. Fretboards are ebony versus rosewood, and you also have dot inlays on the custom shop versus the standards eventually getting a trapezoid one. Now, the body design itself, it seems to be pretty much identical. You just get binding on the custom shop version, whereas the standards did not get it. The control layouts are exactly the same. Master volume, master tone with a 3-way toggle switch, bridge and tailpiece, 2 humbuckers. The back side of the instrument is the same. You still have that comfort carve right there, and they are looking pretty much identical. But notice the control cavity layouts. It's slightly larger on the custom shop version, but you have the same output jack. The back of the headstock, the custom shop ones have an ink stamp serial number versus impressed, and you also have slightly different tuners. And just for fun here, we'll run it by the prototype as well. So same headstock difference here, but the prototype didn't have any Les Paul designation to it at all. But here's what's interesting. Both of these had ebony fretboards. You still have the inlay difference and no binding on the custom shop, binding on this one, but it's interesting to know that that's where it got the ebony from. Now the body style, clearly very different, but still the same as the other DC standards. They're chambered mahogany bodies with maple tops, but the cutaways are still different on here. The prototype has the M3 layout versus the master volume, master tone 3-way toggle switch. Pickups were also different on this one. Mini humbucker versus 2 humbuckers. And the back, once again, different. The prototype did not have the belly carve, and it has the coffin control cavity. And the same differences on the back of the headstock as between the regular standard and different tuners. So spec-wise on here, you've got a 2-piece maple top with a chambered out mahogany body. I don't think they've made a solid body double cut standard. Just kind of their characteristic here. You've got a mahogany neck, and what's unique about this one is the ebony fretboard, similar to the prototype. And you have these large dot inlays. It's kind of strange that a custom shop model that's not, a 335 dot reissue would have dots, but, for some reason they decided to do this. But it appears we have a 57 Classic and something like a 498T in this one. No coil splits or anything, just standard pots and a 3-way toggle switch. So let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench and take a look at its individual parts and specs. Inside the DC Pro here, I was actually really impressed with the way these cavities look. It's awesome how it's just a natural mahogany color. That's a nice tight long neck tenon. You can see the maple top exposed. Now the pickups are kind of interesting. At first I thought the bridge pickup or the neck pickup had been replaced, but apparently this is correct. It's a 57 Classic in the neck and a 498T in the bridge. Pickup reading wise, I get an 8.8 on the bridge and then a 4.15 in the neck. That was the middle position. I forgot this thing doesn't work. 7.49. You've got a regular Nashville style bridge on here that says made in Germany. Then your tailpiece is a full weight one with a line going all the way across. This particular example has the golden bell knobs and again, 3-way toggle switch that's defective. Now, I find this interesting. Every double cut standard or high-end version has the same ding right here. I'm guessing somebody does it like reaching for a 3-way toggle switch because they're used to a regular Les Paul or something. I mean, this thing's pretty beat up. It was definitely well loved and used. You've got a beautiful maple top on here though. So mahogany neck with an ebony fretboard. This one definitely needs a little bit of a cleaning, something I would normally do. But when I send the guitars back because of issues, I like to not touch them. I've taken a few screws apart to make it worth its trip here anyways. I think that's worthwhile. You've got the Les Paul DC Pro on the truss rod cover. Not all those seem to have that. I think that's more for an earlier one. And then the Gibson logo on this freaky looking headstock. Get a 1.68 inch nut width, which increases to 2.06 at the 12th. I get a 0.82 at the first fret, which increases to 0.91 at the 12th. So a fairly thin neck. Moving on to the back side here, you can see you've got a metal jack plate and somebody has swapped out the strap buttons for the Schaller style. And inside the control cavity itself, pots are original, and I'm guessing that 3-way toggle switch maybe got damaged. You might be able to fix that by just bending that a little bit, but then sometimes when you do that, you just break the whole thing. But inside here, you can see this is also a chambered mahogany body. However, this one feels significantly heavier than the other standards that I've had. Back of the neck, everything's looking pretty okay here, besides the fretboard expanding past the edge of the neck. But here you can see the back. Gibson Custom Shop with this style of Gibson tuner. Then your serial number 89056, meaning 1998 in production. This particular example weighs 8 pounds, 2.2 ounces, but man, it must be body heavy to feel as heavy as it does. Now that we know all about this instrument, let's go ahead and hear how it sounds. The whole straight pull headstock design, does it help it stay in tune? Yeah, sure. But do I want this headstock on every Gibson? No, it's a little bit too goofy for me, but if you're used to the PRS headstock or the Heritage headstocks, I mean, you probably don't have any issues with this. However, in a side-by-side comparison, did I necessarily feel that this custom shop version was a lot better than the USA standard? Not really. It felt like a similar guitar. This one's actually a little bit heavier, but I do like the look of the ebony fretboard, but I personally prefer the trapezoid inlays. So I hope you enjoyed this up-close look at the DC Pro. There's not very many videos online of these, so at least now there's one, so you can just take a look at how freaky these things are. I had a good time checking this one out. Unfortunately, it's not going to be for sale by me because there were a few undisclosed issues, so I do have to send this one back, but I wanted to get a quick video in. That way its trip up here to Ohio wasn't completely fruitless. The original case for these is the early Gibson custom art and historic case. Later on, they ditched this whole textured vibe and they moved this from here down there. But I really like these early ones because they kind of have a very fancy vibe to them. They're a little bit freaky looking, but I love these things because they're very vintage-esque. We've got 4 latches on the front and 1 on the back. And the handle's a little bit different. It's not plastic. It's got a little bit of leather-like material over it. And on the inside, it's a nice dark burgundy material. It definitely fits the guitar super well, and this kind of helps you show off that flame top. Only a single neck rest, but it's jacked up so much that you don't necessarily need that bottom one, so it is definitely protective. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this Les Paul DC Pro, I'll go ahead and link the seller's listing for this one. The issues with this instrument are the 3-way toggle switch does not work properly. It always goes to that middle position. And along the neck, this has been in Florida, and the fretboard has expanded past the edges of the neck, and that's caused the finish to crack. You can feel the fretboard ridge right here, so it's kind of uncomfortable to play. So you'd probably want to sand that back down or restore the proper humidity to this fretboard. Other than that, you might want to adjust the neck because I did notice some fret buzzing that just kind of deadened out the notes. But I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at this one anyways. Thank you, Troglodytes, for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.